For today's lesson, we are going to talk about the Punnett Square. When we say Punnett Square, it's a square that helps us get the probability of a pair of parents having offspring with the same traits and characteristics. But before we start using the Punnett Square, we have to understand these basic terms. The first term is the alleles. When we say alleles, these are letters. So you have capital letters and small letters. When we say alleles, we can consider them as the flavor of genes. Okay? So later on, we will be understanding more about these alleles. We have two types of alleles. The first one is the dominant allele, and the second one is the recessive allele. When we say dominant allele, basically these are represented by capital letters. So an example of that is capital letter B. This is the dominant allele. Sometimes we use other letters also. C, M, X, we can also use them. Okay? And then let's say for example that dominant allele is representing something. So it's representing a characteristic. So for example, the dominant allele is, let's talk about height. For example, it means tall. Okay? So the dominant allele B or the capital letter B is representing the height tall. And when we say recessive allele, of course, we're going to get the counterpart of that, which is the small letter b. And it means if the dominant allele is tall, then the recessive allele B means short. Okay? So these alleles are basically considered to be the flavors of genes because they are representing characteristics or traits. Aside from that, we will also understand the term homozygous dominant, okay? And then we also have here the term homozygous recessive and the heterozygous. So first, let's understand the term homo. When you say homo, it means the same, okay? So when we say homozygous dominant, it means you are going to have the same alleles. You have a pair of alleles and they're the same. And they're both dominant. So an example of that will be 2 capital letter B. Okay? And then we also have the homozygous recessive, which means you have two the same alleles and they are recessive. An example of that is the 2 small letter b or a pair of small letter b. And then we say heterozygous, okay? When we say hetero, it means it's different, okay? Or they are different. So we have a pair of alleles, but they are different from each other. So basically, you will have the dominant allele and the recessive allele. So that will be B capital letter and B small letter. You have to take note that if you're going to write the heterozygous, you are going to write the capital letter first before the lowercase. Okay, so these pairs of alleles are called the genotype. They are called genotype because they are the combination of genes. Okay, now if we're going to interpret this genotype, we will be able to come up with a physical trait. Okay, so for example, you will have here the homozygous dominant. When you say homozygous dominant, it means you have 2 capital letters. So since you have 2 capital letters, the first capital letter means tall and the second capital letter means tall. Therefore, these offspring, oh by the way, these are the offspring. These are the possible offspring of the parents. So if you have 2 capital letter B, it means most likely this offspring will be tall. Okay? And then for the homozygous recessive, you have 2 small letter b. If you're going to take a look at our alleles, small letter b means short. So basically, since you have 2 small letters, this offspring most likely will be short. Now, let's go to the heterozygous. When we say heterozygous, again, it's a combination of 2 different alleles. We have the dominant one and the recessive. Now, if you're going to predict the physical trait of heterozygous, you have to always consider the dominant one, because it's called dominant because it will be dominant. It will win the battle between the dominant and recessive. So the dominant one will be tall according to our allele. So basically our heterozygous will be also tall. Okay, so these are the physical traits. When you say physical traits, we are going to call them phenotype technically. To sum it up, alleles are letters and they are representing traits. And then if these or if one allele is paired with another allele, you will have either homozygous or heterozygous. Under homozygous, we have the homozygous dominant and the homozygous recessive. For homozygous dominant, both letters are capital letters, and for the homozygous recessive, both letters are small. For the heterozygous, you have the combination of small letter and um, capital letter. So these are called genotypes, or the combination of genes. Then this combination of genes will tell you what the characteristics or physical traits of the offspring will be, and these characteristics are basically called the phenotype. Now let's move on to our first example. So we have here the alleles A and A, which are capital and small letters respectively. For the capital letter, which is the dominant allele, it means curly hair or curly. And for the small letter A, that is your recessive allele, that's the straight hair. Now we have here the parents. The first one is a combination of capital letter A and small letter a. So basically, this is called heterozygous. And we also have here, let's say for example, this is the father, and the combination or the genotype of the father is capital letter A and capital letter A. That means it is homozygous dominant. Okay, so using the Punnett square below, we are going to predict the probability of them having offspring with the same or similar traits. So basically, if it's the mother and this is the mother is also curly, although it has a small letter A, it's still curly because curly hair is the dominant trait. And then for the father, he is curly because it's homozygous dominant. So how are we going to use the Punnett square? First, you're going to distribute the alleles. So for example, the mother will be placed here. So you're going to put here A and A. And then for the father, you're going to put A here and another A there. Okay. So basically, what you are putting or placing here are the alleles of the genotype of these parents. Okay, so for the first box, we are going to fill in the first box by intersecting the letters. Okay, so we have here, for the first box, we have here A and then another A, which are both capital letters. And for this box, we are going to use this one and then the letter above it, which is a small letter A. So this will be the genotype inside this box. And then another box here, we have A, which is above that box, and another um, capital letter A on the side. So we're going to put both capital letters here. And for the last box, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get the letter or the capital letter on the side, so that's A, and the letter under it or above it, which will be small letter a. So for the results, we get these data. You have 1 and 2. So you have 2 homozygous dominant. So A, which means homozygous dominant, you will have 2/4. And we also have the heterozygous. We have A, that will be also 1, 2. So that's also 2 over 4. So these fractions will give us the probability of these parents having offspring with the same traits or appearance like them. So for example, for the homozygous dominant, that's 2 over 4. So if you're going to get the percentage of that, you will get 50%. So 2 divided by 4 times 100, that will give you 50%. And for the heterozygous, you also have 2 over 4. So 2 divided by 4 times 100, that will give you also 50%. Therefore, this result says that all of their children in the future will be all curly, or they will have curly hairs. It's just that 50% of them, or 50% of the possibility, will be homozygous dominant, and also 50% for the heterozygous. For our next example, we have here the alleles capital letter B, which means brown eyes, and small letter b, which means blue eyes. So let's say, for example, these are the parents. We have the first parent and the second parent. The first parent is basically homozygous dominant. Okay? And then for the second parent, that will be homozygous recessive. So if you're going to into their traits, interpret the alleles or genotype into their traits, you will have for the first parent, which is homodominant, basically this one has brown eyes. And for the second parent, which is homozygous recessive, this one will have the blue eyes. Okay, now let's try to find out the probability of them having offspring with brown eyes and blue eyes. So we will have here the first parent, you're going to put here capital letter B and another capital letter B. And for this side, we're going to put small letter b and another small letter b. So if you're going to fill in the boxes, the first box will be this one and this one, that will be B and B. And then for the next box, that will be this one and that one, that is also B and B. And for the third box, that one and this one will give you B, B, and this one and that one will give you B and B. So if you, as you can see, all of them are the same. So we have capital letter B and small letter b. So that is basically heterozygous, which means since this is heterozygous, it means they will have still the brown eyes. Why brown eyes? Because brown eyes is the dominant allele, and you have the capital letter B, which represents the brown eyes, and that will be the characteristics or physical trait of the offspring, brown eyes. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 heterozygous. So that will be 4 over 4. Therefore, you will have 100% probability of these parents having children or kids with brown eyes. It's just that the children will be heterozygous. For our next example, we have different alleles. Okay, so we have 4 different alleles. We have the dominant allele A, which means tall, dominant allele B, which is blue eyes, recessive allele A, which means short, and the recessive allele B, which means brown eyes. So we have now 4 different alleles, and here is the representation of the parent's genotype. So we have here AABB. As you can see in the structure, you have capital letters of A and then small letter B. No, so this part we can consider this as homozygous dominant, but this part is heterozygous. And then that's for the first parent. This is the first parent. For the second parent, in terms of the height, it's heterozygous, but in terms of the eye color, this is homozygous dominant. So if you're going to describe this one in terms of its phenotype, AABB means it has a blue eye, or it has a pair of blue eye, and then it means the BB is blue eyes, and AA means tall. So basically, it's tall and blue eyes. Why blue eyes? Again, because you have the capital letter B there, which means it's dominant. And for this one, this is also tall because you have there the capital letter A, which means it's dominant, and both capital letter B, which means this is obviously blue eyes. Now let's use the Punnett Square. Let's say this is the first parent and this is the second parent. So the first thing that we're going to do is to distribute the alleles or the genotype above the box. So first we have here this one, dominant allele A to be paired with the dominant allele B. So that's the first. And then we also have here the dominant allele A and the recessive allele B. So that will be A and B recessive. And then we also have here dominant A and dominant B. So that will be A, B, both dominant. And then we also have here the dominant A and the recessive B. So that will be A and B. So this is how you distribute the genotypes. Okay. Next, for this one, we are going to put here dominant A and dominant B. So this is the position of that. And then dominant A and dominant B again. And then recessive A and dominant B. And another recessive A and dominant B. So if we are going to get the traits of the offspring, it will be like this. You have AB for this box. Let's go first with this box. You have AB, both dominant, and another AB, both dominant. So the result of this will be AA, BB, all dominant. Okay? So what does it mean? Since you have dominant AA, this is homozygous dominant, this person will be tall. And aside from being tall, it's also homozygous dominant in terms of the color of the eyes. So that will be blue eyes. So this person will be tall and will have blue eyes at the same time. For the next box, we are going to get this one and that one. That will be AA and then dominant B and recessive B. Okay, so I hope you can follow. Next, for this box, we are going to use this genotype or alleles and this allele. So that will be dominant A, dominant A, dominant B, dominant B. Okay, let's go back to the second box. It means since in terms of height, this is homozygous dominant, so this person will be tall. But when it comes to the eyes, since it's heterozygous, although it will be also blue-eyed, but it's heterozygous. Okay, so that's different from the first box because you have the homozygous dominant for the blue eyes, but for the second box you have the heterozygous but still blue eyes. So the first box is also the same with the third box. Now let's go to the fourth box. That will be dominant A and dominant A, then dominant B, and then recessive B. So basically the fourth box is also the same with the second box. You will have a tall person with blue eyes, but the eye is, or the color of the eye is heterozygous. Now let's go to the next row. So that will be AA. So you get this one, AA. and then BB, or the dominant A, dominant A, dominant B, dominant B. So it's the same with the first box. And then you're going to get this one again for the next box, that will be dominant A, dominant A, and then dominant B, and then recessive B. And then for this box, you will get this one, dominant A, dominant A, and then dominant B, and another dominant B. For this box, you're going to get dominant A, and then dominant A again, and then dominant B, and recessive B. For this part, so like what I have said earlier, you are going to always put the dominant letter or dominant allele first before the recessive one. So we have here a recessive A and then the dominant A. So you're going to write it like this: dominant A, then recessive A, and then dominant B and dominant B. And then for the next one, you will have the dominant A again and recessive A again. So this is dominant A, recessive A, and then first you will write the dominant B and then the recessive B. Okay? And then you're going to do the same thing if you're going to follow the rule. So that will be A dominant, A recessive, and then both dominant B. And then you will have dominant A, and then recessive A, and then dominant B, and recessive B. So for this example, for the last row, you will have dominant A, recessive A, dominant B, dominant B. And then dominant A, recessive A, dominant B, recessive B. And then dominant A, recessive A, dominant B, dominant B. And for the last box, you will be putting dominant A, and then recessive A, dominant B, and recessive B. Now we are going to get the number of these combinations. So first, let's focus on the first box. You will have A, B, B. So you're going to count the number of boxes with this kind of combination. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and okay, we're done. We have 4 over 16. And for the next one, that will be A, B, B. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's also 4 over 16. And then the next one, we have A, B, B. So you have 1, 2. Okay, sorry, that's wrong. Okay, let's just erase the circle for that. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. That will be 4 over 16. And then for this box again, so that will be A, B, B. So it will be 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's also 4 over 16. So if you're going to get the probability of these, they are all 25%. Okay, 25%, 25%, and then 25%. How to get the 25%? That will be 4 divided by 16 times 100. That's 25%. Now let's interpret the these data into their phenotype or into their characteristics physically. So for the first one, so you have homozygous dominant in terms of the height. So this will be tall, and at the same time, it's also homozygous dominant in terms of the color of the eye. So this is blue eyes. Okay? So there is a 25% chance that these parents will have children who are both tall and blue-eyed. And then we also have here homozygous dominant in terms of height. So this is also tall. And this is heterozygous because you have two different combinations of letters. But still, this is blue eyes because you have capital letter B. Okay? And then for this one, you are having heterozygous in terms of the height, but still you have capital letter A, so this will also be tall. And you have um, blue eyes because this is homozygous dominant. Okay? And then for our last result, you have tall also, although it's heterozygous. And then you also have blue eyes, which is also heterozygous. So all of their offspring in the future will have blue eyes and they will be all tall. It's just that they're different in terms of their allele. Some of them are homozygous dominant, some of them are heterozygous. Okay, so it's not possible that their generation, it's not possible that this generation will have short offspring or short members. Same thing, it's also not possible that a member will be having a brown eye.